I'd like to thank everybody for attending and also for being invited to do this presentation. Fytogreen is a company of 43 dedicated horticulturalists, designers, constructors, admin team, and we've been operating now for 19 years and originated in Melbourne. We have a nursery down here which is about 3,000 square metres for growing all of our indoor plants and growing the green wall systems and phytoarbor systems. We have an office in Sydney and we have another nursery in Brisbane. We operate all up through the eastern seaboard, but also have projects in South Australia, Tasmania and Western Australia. And occasionally we head over to New Zealand for projects that come to light from time to time. I'm just going to move this on. Did that work? It didn't work. Hold on, sorry. We've developed over the years a raft of green technology solutions, and you know, our first stint in this country long time ago was developing lightweight soil mixes with our hydrocell product. We were finalists in the Save Water Awards in 2004. You know, the foam is a phenomenal product that enables us to lighten soils, increase water holding capacity of high airfill porosity soils, and then it can do the inverse on clay soils. It can introduce air into spaces that are very lacking in air, and once you get air and water into soils, you can start to make things grow. Vertical gardens came along for us in 2005 when we were asked if we could put together a strawberry display for Sydney Garden Festival. And so we thought, well, we can do that. Haven't done that before, but we'll have a go. And so we set up on some panels using our foam, a strawberry display, and that's how we sort of found our way into the vertical garden sphere. Other things that have come along, you know, green facades and planter boxes. They're generally entwined. All of our work is on structure. We don't put a soil into the ground. We do everything off concrete. And so we're creating, you know, planter box and green roof space where volume and weight limitations come into play. 3D gardening, you'll see that come up in the presentation. That's really things that we've started to develop in that more funky range and getting away from the typical two-dimensional look. Bespoke greening solutions, that'll be our phytoarbors and our floating wetlands that we've been developing to just broaden the horizon about really introducing biophilia into situations that aren't necessarily welcoming of those you know, interventions. And that's so for us, the specialty nature of these designs, construction and maintenance is a very important part. The specialised elevated maintenance, we have a team of 14 maintenance staff. So it's, you know, not far away from a third of our team dedicated to maintenance throughout the eastern seaboard and South Australia. And it's a big part of, you know, representing and maintaining our brand. You know, we welcome anyone to come to a Fytogreen installation, and, you know, they're looked after with pride. Biophilic design, it's a word often used. There's many different forms of this. You know, really it's about bringing green infrastructure into spaces that aren't natural, be it glass, steel, concrete, wind, high heat, low light. All of those things present challenges to bringing this type of thing in. You know, all green infrastructure contributes to reducing VOCs and particulate matter. It reduces that urban heat island effect, provides insulation, generates O2, absorbs CO2. And these are generally in places where it's not happening naturally anymore, because we're back to that built environment. Why have gardens in the built structure? This is one of the self-assessment questions. It's, I can read through those, but I think that I'll just pause here low enough for people to have a look. It's once again improving that air quality, allowing plants to reduce CO2, VOCs, particulate matter, and increase the O2 levels into that built environment. Provide insulation, reduce sound by green infrastructure absorbing sound, reducing echo, reducing the heat island effect, designing plants and solutions that will work in varying light conditions. And that's a big challenge when we're designing, certainly at the low light area. Designing plants that will cope with wind. It's levels 1 to 5 on a high-rise building are very straightforward. It's when you get to levels 10 to 40 that things start to become vastly different. It's colder, it's windier, everything's more extreme. Increasing the marketability of a building is a big plus, and that's why really most green walls are installed. Then we've on the other side of that, you've got development approval compliance. We've got a number of projects in Sydney at the moment where the only way the developer could do what they wanted to do was to ensure that they had like-for-like green space coming back onto a building. You don't have the floor plan anymore, so you have to do it in a vertical sense. And so that's where we get involved. And that may be green walls, it may be green facades, it may be planter boxes at elevation. There's many different ways of providing solutions. Green walls, I think we would be the leading company by a factor of 3 in Australia in terms of the number of square metres of green walls installed and maintained. There's been a number of iterations over the years as we've improved our systems, had to adjust to the changing environment, be it price, affordability, then complying with fire requirements, which is the new one that for us is omnipresent. So anything over 4 metres externally, you have to have a fire solution or fire compliance solution. Anything internally in an access egress area, be it a lobby, adjacent to fire stairs, lifts, needs to be fire compliant in today's world. And it's a big change. And thankfully, we started work on this many years ago and have been able to get a compliant 1530.3 solution that's enabled us to do quite a number of projects, and they'll pop up as I wander through the presentation. We have a phyto-felt pocket system that is our economical solution to meet the commercial pressures of life, but it still provides a fully hydroponic solution that creates what we call an integrated morphology of plants. We're not isolated little holes for plants in pots or plants coming out of plastic vessels. This is a full integration, so we'll get evolvement of species and over time, evolvement of new species coming in, and that makes the walls move and present a really interesting solution over the period of its life. Being all inert and in a hydroponic form, we don't have what I call a shelf life. We don't have to replace soils. We don't have to look at degradation. The inert media will enable us to have roots come and go as part of the plant's natural life cycle. The Fytogreen solution was our mainstay for many years, and the project in front of you is one of those early large projects. Unfortunately, we can't produce that form in a fire compliant form anymore, but it's a phenomenal solution. It enables us to grow shrubs, trees up to 2 to 3 meters high and still be anchored into the substrate. Now, this wall here, I don't have a photo looking along the edge of it, but I'll have one coming up of another project. The ficus Benjamina in here are substantial. They're well over 2 meters, and we're pruning them back now as part of the process of maintaining the wall. This is a project in Melbourne on Burke Street. So the former project I had up on the screen is a project in Brisbane with the ARIA Property Group. This project is, they're both 200 square metre walls, 20 metres high, and the ficus Benjamina that we have in these are a substantial 2.5 metres high, coming out of the wall another 1.5 metres. So it's a spectacular wall to stand under and look up. And you see the way we've designed this wall, we've created what we call fractal factors, where we have this wall, this is Burke Street on Dockland, so it's very windy, runs east-west, and we get a lot of south winds coming straight up Burke Street. And so to create the diversity in the species, which is a key cornerstone of Fytogreen design, we create the fractal factors that enable us to do that. So that's the undulation that you see on the wall itself. This is one of the first projects we did for the Urban Forest Fund and in Melbourne, which was designed to encourage places in the city that weren't lending themselves to be green, but would love to be green. It was beyond the reach of the premises owners, but so Melbourne set up a funding arrangement where 50% was funded. I'm going to just run this short video, which will just show you the process of how this all comes about. So it was a great project to be involved with, and you know, the image on the left is how it is today. It's you know, with the COVID lockdowns, you know, the loop bar's been closed, so there's been no money for maintenance. So we got a first look back in it recently, and you know, it was 15 months between maintenance visits, and really, as you see it there, that's what it was like. It's a very resilient design. It's got phenomenal plant species list in there. There's 72 species through there. We're on our own ilk when it comes to that. Most of our fellow green wall companies will max out at 12. So it's a key part to really make these things interesting and diverse. Oops, sorry, I want to get out of that one. On the left, we've got one of our early column planter designs we did for Warringah Mall, where we're having, it's a suspended green wall design, and it'll come up a little later on, where we've worked in conjunction with Tensile, a specialist wire rope company, and green facade company, and we have suspended panels dotted around in a spiral form around the columns in the Warringah shopping mall. In the centre one, we have one of our tallest indoor green walls. This is 53 metres tall in the Tower 4 Tower Collins Square in Melbourne. This was quite an interesting design because we had to limit and design to a very low lux level, much lower than we normally would. So between 1,500 and 2,500 was the range we had to work with. next to no natural light, apart from a little bit at the very top. And it's unfortunately one of those ones that's hard to get to in public, but it's a phenomenal environment for those working in that building. Fiji Airport, one of those ones we did many years ago. It's performing beautifully. It's the Fytofelt system, Sky Needle in Brisbane. You'll see with a lot of designs that Fytogreen do, they're extremely diverse in the way that the species come together. There's quite a process in design. It's about integrating compatibility of plants adjacent to each other so that you don't crowd out, overshadow. And certainly when you look at the Tower 4 planting design, we had to be very, very careful in there, because if you start to get too aggressive, and you see we've got the monsteras on the right, everything underneath there will struggle to a degree. So we're down to the Philodendron heteroecium, which can cope with those lower light levels. Just a range of green walls, Illumina in Brisbane, Miami Medical Centre in Queensland. So once again, you've got some very, very tall species in there. They're running at just under 2 meters. And then just move you on to the next one, some recently completed projects. On the left, we've got the ARIA standard project in Brisbane, just completed a few months ago. It's the largest fire compliant green wall in the country at 460 square meters. A fire compliant version in Sydney at Doohat Avenue on the right, with the rope access team working down its face. So they're working on davit arms that get them positioned out and over the green wall, so that they're typically hanging between 600 and 700 millimeters off the green wall, so that they can still reach and do their work, but not damage the foliage. Where are we? So a range of different residential type green walls. So the ability to create things that can interface with the built structure is what we thrive and specialize in. And things that are important to us are light. So if we're dealing with what we call low natural light conditions, we'll set up a daylight analysis report. And that's really an Illuminaire process where we're wanting to measure lux at the winter and summer solstice and the equinox at 9 o'clock, 12 noon and 3 p.m. And we're looking for what we call the maximum lux level and the minimum lux level, which enables us to select plant species that will work within that range and thrive. You know, you can plant a plant in very low light and it'll survive, but it won't cope with any checks that may interrupt its ability to grow. And as a result, it's just on a slow death to departure. There's a series of self-assessment questions here that we can sort of, you know, stop on, and we're nearly finished the green wall component. So, you know, from an ecological, sustainable design perspective, these are the things that matter to us. You know, the growing environment, it's really about what light levels do we have, if it's indoor or outdoor. If it's indoor, then we do supplementary lighting to our preferred average minimum is 3000 lux, and we're after a particular Kelvin range. And then if it's outdoors, but very dark shade or deep shade, then we'll conduct a daylight analysis report, which enables us to select plants that will cope with the light. We then have to cross-reference that with what wind conditions we're dealing with. Now, indoors, it's easy. Outdoors, it can be quite problematic, because a lot of the green walls we do outdoors in low light will be on laneways where the wind is quite aggressive. Things that are important when you're designing a project is, how do you get back there for future access? It's easy when it's a construction site, but the moment that protection goes, you've then got to figure out how you're going to get there. So for commercial projects, it can be things like traffic management plans, footpath permits, council permits, and then you've got rope access, design, davit points. All of those things come into play. Supply of services and water services, so water, power, drainage. You know, most of our large green walls are sustainable design parameters, so we'll drain to a collection tank for reuse with rainwater or potable water top-up for the tank, so that enables us to recycle, because being a hydroponic media, it's all about pulse fertigation rather than running it to a very dry arrangement. So for us, we like to design in that recollection and reuse. It enables us to be far freer with the way we plan. Power, we don't need much unless we're needing lights. And drainage, once again, it's either interface back to recollection use or to stormwater. Host walls, that's normally quite straightforward. Our green wall systems are very light at 45 kilos a square metre, future saturated weight, allowing for foliage. So that's not a difficult ask. The budget's always a good one, something that we ask early, certainly in a residential environment, because people have wishes and aspirations that sometimes don't reflect the checkbook. So it's better to get all that out of the way early, and then it's working through what do you need to allow for future maintenance. Now, if it's a walk-up, then it's typically about 7.5% of the capital value per annum. If it requires access equipment, then it gets somewhere between 10 and 12%. Just a range of green walls, and then I think we're nearly at the end. So different products. It's green walls on the left in Brisbane, a school in Wodonga on the middle lower. This one was an interesting one in Brisbane in the middle upper. That's actually a gate that slides backwards and forwards. So it was, we've done a number of those, be it swinging gates, sliding gates. They make life nice and challenging. One of our large green walls in Adelaide. It's quite spectacular. So that's the end of the green wall part. I mean, if there'll be some others that pop up as part of other things as we go through. Is there any questions that people would like to ask on green walls before we move on to the green roof part?
Yes, I've got one question.
Yeah.
I noticed some of the other vertical gardens had irrigations running along the top, and I didn't really see any other irrigation lines like running down the wall, but it was only starting at the top. So the water just tend to sort of like trickle down. So because the plants at the bottom really kind of suffered from the water. Is that a bad design, or is it just something that needs to be corrected, like putting another irrigation line in?
So it depends on the substrate that you're growing in. If it's a soil or media, particulate media type substrate, then you have got some challenges. The way we design our irrigation is that we have an irrigation line every 500 mils going up a wall, and we have check valves in place that enable us to completely balance water and take out lag. And our typical irrigation event would be between 3 and 4 minutes, because if you have a scenario where the irrigation is only at the top, you've got to manage to plan how long it's going to take to come down, and ultimately water will always settle at the bottom, so hence the saturation that you're experiencing.
Okay, thank you.
Shall I continue on, Vanessa? I'll continue on. So look, we'll move to green roofs.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself.
Okay. Do you want me to continue on?
No, there's just a couple of questions in the chat.
Okay.
Samantha was wondering in regards to fire compliance, is it still compliant if the irrigation fails and the substrate dries out?
They get very upset if we do things like that. So where we've got a fire compliance green wall, and it depends on the fire report that we need to comply with. We have a relay system that enables us to respond to a fire alarm from the building management system that will activate our green walls to go into what we call pulse mode. So they will irrigate continually until the fire alarm is released. That's something that we've developed to meet the code and it's certainly done its trick. To have a wall dry and dead in the first place means that the system's hasn't been designed to be intuitive enough. I mean, we have, gosh, I think we'd have over 200 of our green walls would have alarms coming back to our maintenance team, which will come as an SMS on their phone. It'll go to an SMS to the facility management team or whoever, that someone's turned the power off, someone's turned the water off, we're not meeting our irrigation as scheduled. So we need to do something. You're always blind if you don't have it set up in such a way, and we tend not to do those. I mean, that would be, to not do one would mean it's a residential environment where budget's precious.
Okay.
But it's a false economy.
Yeah. So usually if it needs to be fire compliant, it's for a commercial building and you have all of those systems in place. Is that right?
But even a non-fire compliant one, we treat the same in terms of irrigation control and monitoring, because it's an investment. And look, for very few extra dollars, you can have it report to your phone, make everybody relax. They can go on holiday without worrying, all of those sorts of things, be it at a residential level. And these things become cheaper and cheaper now. And so, you know, as I say, typically it would add another $600 or $800, depending on the complexity of the project at residential level, to be alarmed and know what's going on when you're not there.
Okay, thank you. There's a couple of other questions there. What methods do you use to keep the water out of the building?
So our green wall systems all sit off the precast or the host wall, and the host wall is always waterproofed. So and in any penetrations we put through the waterproofing, isolated with a butyl tape to mask the penetration and seal the penetration. There's a 20 mil gap between the host wall and the back of our systems, so that enables air to move, stops roots developing. You know, there are a number of species, the Xanadu's, the philodendrons of this world, that are very aggressive in their root development, and certainly as part of maintenance, it's important to make sure that they don't get into the drip trays, and it's important they don't get behind the wall and find their way to places you don't want them to be.
Okay. Somebody asked about your plant list.
Plants what?
Your list, your species that you've obviously developed a whole range of plants that survive in different light levels and wind levels and all that sorts of stuff. So they were wondering, did you develop that yourselves, or is this information available elsewhere?
No, I have to say it's very much in-house. It's we would have one of the largest Ripsalis collections and aroid collections in our nursery. Our botanist, Eric Van Zulicom, who, for anyone who's interested, you can find him on his United Natures link, and he certainly has developed some phenomenal plant designs, and he's a very important cog in our wheel. And he's, you know, it's how plants interact with each other that enables us to continue to test and work out what will perform under different light levels. And it's the, you know, the type of integration and diversity that you see in our designs are due to the fact that we pull from a list of about 850 species, and which is vastly different to most others. And that makes our life interesting. We want to keep challenging the norm. And I think, you know, to have a look at the different projects that we've completed, you'll be hard pressed to find something with 15 or less species in it. It doesn't matter what the size is. The planting team sometimes grizzle like hell because it makes the life harder, but it certainly adds a whole heap of spice to the outcome.
Okay. So I assume that's locked in a safe. No, that's fine. What else? Architects tend to not allow enough width for the structures, what would be the narrowest width of the green wall systems be?
So our green wall system off the host wall sits at 70 mils. So it's very narrow, but then you've got to allow for foliage growth. So, you know, the narrowest sustainable long-term outcome for foliage protrusion would be 200 mils. But we really try to get more. So when we talk about that, we're talking about a 300 mil, including foliage, would be the most compact that you'd want to design. To design less, you can do it, but you're really getting down to really boring monocultures. So you would design fit for purpose. If that was the limitations, then that's what you design back to. But you do not want monocultures. So you've just got to come up with some compatible, diverse species that will stay compact enough, but not suffocate each other over time.
Okay, how do you calculate weight, and does this allow for mature plants?
Yes, so the 45 kilos, it's surprising. Everyone thinks, oh my gosh, these things weigh a lot, but you cut a plant off at above the root ball, and the bias of weight is vastly different to what you think. And the weight allowance that we've got at 45 kilos has got an enormous factor in there. It's got 25 kilos a square metre for plants. So that gives you some perspective.
Oh, okay.
Now, I could probably challenge that by loading up a green wall with Carpobrodus only and never trimming it, but that would be one of the few species that would do that to me.
Okay. All right. What plant species have surprised you most with their ability to thrive on a green wall?
Oh, it always depends on the conditions we've put it in. So I think the darker the space, the more interesting things pop up over time. And that's the beauty of our system. The whole surface is available for spores to, you know, germinate and develop. And so you get a lot of different ferns appearing in different places that you didn't expect them to come from, because you're providing the environment. Whereas if you have a pot system or plastic container type system, none of those things are possible. And so it's the whole surface that is a place for development. And, you know, of course, all your surface area roots, you know, become part of that interesting structure that you can see as well. I don't have a favourite. I'd have to ask Eric for that. He would have a whole heap of them. But, you know, it's always horses for courses. You can't put something that needs light in the shade. And so it's a matter of providing the solutions. I think one of the walls we're most proud of is one I showed probably second slide in, and that's the Medibank, 2 Medibank walls in Burke Street in the Docklands. You know, we had to deal with really difficult conditions, and designing a fractal factor into a high wind, low light, limited direct sun, species that would prefer to be in a warmer climate than Melbourne, enabling them to proliferate. And you can do that. Once you take the wind chill out, you can create all sorts of opportunity. But then you've got to take into account that you've removed some of the light levels. So things that you would naturally think about it in a temperate climate, you have to bring in from a subtropical arrangement. And that enables us to design those interesting moments where you don't expect to see them.
What's the oldest Ficus benjamina that you've got growing?
The oldest?
Yeah, I'm just wondering how that's going to go long term. Like, they're just so vigorous in their roots.
Yeah, but you've got to imagine in a green wall, they aren't growing in the soil where they've got unlimited depth, unlimited volume. And we're pruning them. So if we let them go crazy, then you get stretching, and that's all a response to light levels. So if the light levels are strong, and you'll see some coming up in some of the other projects I'm going to show, they maintain balanced foliage. And I'm talking about in a temperate Melbourne climate. It's only a response to light that you get leaf development and you know, structural behaviour and growth. So the more limited the light, the less the leaf volume, the more they stretch looking for it in their growth cycles.
Okay. Dan has asked if you're able to give a rough install price per square metre for a residential wall, say around 20 square metres.
If it's a nice, easy walk-up one, you know, including a year's maintenance, somewhere around the 1,300 to 1,400 a square metre plus GST.
Okay. Very good. And you're and do you install all up the eastern seaboard? Did you say? Like, is it mainly Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane? Where
Tasmania, South Australia, Western Australia is a little harder, but we have a number of green walls over there. We've got the Perth Library, we've got Telstra, we've got a number of projects in different places. In Western Australia, we tend to use local landscape relationships that we have, be it at residential level or commercial level. We've got some really fascinating projects coming up over there in the near future. They're just a little bit more challenging, but we do have the ability to achieve quarantine clearance out of our greenhouse. So we can pre-grow everything and ship it over, which enables us to service Tasmania the same way as well.
How about Canberra with frosts?
Oh, that's fine. I mean, it's you know, it's all about what you're designing to. And I mean, we've got green walls in Canberra, but they're all indoors. Haven't been asked to do an outdoor one there. I know there are some. There were some we tendered on and didn't win. Don't know how they're going, but it's a matter of just designing to the light levels, and really most temperate terrestrial species will cope with that.
Okay. Another one, do you find clients understand the value of the cost of maintenance, or is this a stumbling area for them that needs further explanation?
Well, it depends if it's a commercial client or a residential client. And a commercial client, you know, goes in with their eyes open. They've always got their CapEx, and then they've got their body corporate consideration thereafter. A residential client, you know, we all value our money differently. And to be honest, you know, those clients that want it to be done by others will budget for it. Those clients that think that they can do it themselves, we provide a very comprehensive handover manual. We're only a phone call away, and we cater for both. I mean, it's we still have an enormous number of residential projects that we maintain. Surprises me, but I think we do a good job, so we're asked back.
Yeah,
that must mean we're not too expensive, but we're not the cheapest, that's for sure.
Well, they obviously really value the structure, you know, what it provides to them. So they want to. We have a
90% retention rate on our commercial projects from ongoing maintenance. So some we've been maintaining now for 15 years.
That's good. Okay, I think that's about it for the
questions. So we'll go on to roof gardens. And this is what we really started our business on originally. You know, the hydrocell technology enabled me to develop extremely lightweight mineral-based media that provided a whole new sphere of being able to design. And, you know, there'll be a few pages come up in a moment that I'll talk a bit more on that. But, you know, just on the pages we're on here, we've got in the middle top, we've got the Bendigo Hospital. It's 1,000 square meters of green roof at 150 mils deep. So my growing media level layer is 130 mils. That's all I'm growing in. So the bottom 20 mil is drainage cell, geofabric, and the top in this case is just a skim of 10 mil stone mulch. One of our favorite projects down below is and it's won many awards. It's the project up in Sunshine Beach and just on the other side of the Noosa Headlands. So you look on the left-hand side, that's all green roofs rolling up and down and over. And we've got a lovely big green wall there as well. It's a place you can rent for $50,000 a week if you've got the money. So it's a place worth visiting, I must admit. just moving on to some different green roof projects. The left-hand one there is the St Bernard School in Melbourne, the Essendon. There, the Bendigo green roof from a different area. We had to construct, oh God, it's so long ago now, 14 different green roof areas across 5 levels of the building. One of our favourite ones in Sydney is Paramount Recreational Club. It's just really unique foliage combinations to create that one. One of our projects that's won numerous awards. It's the North Bondi Amenities Upgrade. So it, the awards on the left speak for themselves. It was just an opportunity to develop a green roof, primary coastal. So you've got all the coastal elements to deal with, not some of the high winds that I'll come to later, but certainly a whole heap of diversity. And there's a sort of a sequence of how we go through the process. It's one that we've developed over the years that's proved to be, bulletproof. We've, of these thin profile gardens, we have over 80,000 square metres of them in Australia. And, our green roof systems are widely used countrywide. I think we've got gardens in every state now. So this is a little bit of extra information and talks about the components that make up our green roof designs. The key component really that's enabled us to design this way is the hydrocell flakes. They're a product that absorb 50% of their volume in water. They release under capillarity, so not under high tension. When we do all our media design, we do all our soil tests designed at 30 centimetre suction, 32 drops for compaction. So we go a whole heap further than the traditional AS 4419 standard that people use, but we really want to understand how this is going to perform under stress. So when you have 30 centimetre suction, you are really drawing the water out, forcing it out. So you're wanting to understand how well it holds on, and designed for high airfill porosity, so that we have in these thin profile gardens or finite volume gardens like planter boxes, we have the ability to determine the future space available for root development, and that's the air and water exchange. I'll move on through deeper intensive roof gardens and planter boxes. This is really just talking about, and these things are available on our website, the different allowances, makeups, things that are important to enable us to design to these outcomes. Different roof gardens that we have here on the left, a residential garden we did many, many years ago. Lightweight, it's only 160 mil profile. Up the top, the desalination plant, that's 27,000 square metres of green roofs, primary coastal. It's the largest green roof in the Southern Hemisphere. So we had slopes from 2 degrees to 20 degrees. So anything above 15 degrees, we need to develop retention systems to make them stay on the side of the building. That's working with indigenous species, and I think we have a range. Species list was about 26 long, so it's been a phenomenal project, and one that's really just stands the test of time. It's just coming up to 10 years, and we still maintain it today. So down the bottom middle, or bottom left, right, sorry, is a project we did in Brisbane many, many years ago, 170 mil profile. It's the Corso Library in North Lakes. Project we finished last year. This is 447 Collins Street. So we had the joy of lifting a 7.5 metre tree up to the 40th level of a building. So before the crane came down, it's quite a spectacular moment. And we had to drop it in temporarily. So thankfully it was winter. So in its deciduous moment, we didn't have to deal with dust on leaves. while the rest of the scaffolding was erected around it to construct the remaining elevated planters and green facade. So we'll get some new photos up very shortly, because we've just got all that lovely spring flush coming in at the moment. One of our favourite projects, we completed this one earlier this year. This is Paragon, so it's won many awards, and it's called the Urban Forest. So we had a very, very narrow space here. We're talking about 80 square metres, but we have green walls running over 3 levels. Because of the large eaves, we had to do supplementary lighting, which you can see, and the lovely Ficus benjamina that you talked about. And we've got some, other Tristoniopsis and different species in there to break it up. But we're dealing with low light, and so the Ficus benjamina enables us to create a good canopy and create that real urban forest feel. Different green roofs, residential, top and right, commercial, Kangan Bateman TAFE. This is an interesting design conundrum that we had. This is in Docklands, the home of the seagull. So being a TAFE, that was a breakout area from the cafeteria, and the seagulls thought this was a wonderful place to nest and made it totally inhabitable for a while. So in the end, they had to create a netted environment over that whole space, as they have for parts of the Kangan Bateman TAFE roof, just to prevent seagulls from making it uninhabitable by the rest of us. This little private roof garden in Clovelly, we did for an architect on her home property in Sydney. It's just, it's spectacular. It's a 200 mil profile. Very simple design, low care, but very inviting. So that's the end of the green roof part. I suppose we ask a few questions and see what pops up. I can go back to one of the projects that we didn't really have a big slide on, but the Victorian desalination plant, our design weight there was 160 kilos a square metre, so very low, and but we had to deal with 1 in 100 year wind design, so over 100 kilometres an hour. So because of the angular shapes of the building, we had to, wind studies were completed to show the potential for twin vortice effect, so that's uplift. And so about 2,000 square metres of the 27,000 square metres have a net system that we developed that prevent the media from being eroded from a wind event. There's no studies that have been completed for the impact of plant foliage on wind erosion mitigation. So you can only ever measure wind effect on a clean space. And when you see what wind can do, it can roll stones along, they build up velocity, they build up against a parapet, and before you know it, they're blowing off the side of a building. So a lot of the things that we have to design, is based on the wind modelling of spaces, the uplift potential, the potential for mulch to roll, to move, and the netting technique that we've developed, which is a stainless steel mesh net with a 15 mil aperture, very fine, very light, but being stainless steel, and we have a black polypropylene coating on it, so you don't see it with the eye. And the plants, we cut out sections for the plants to grow through. And once you get plants into a space, the wind is ameliorated. It cannot get the speed up, can't get the roll up. It's completely baffled. So it starts to take over under its own steam. So are there any questions on the roof section?
Yes, we have a few questions. So we have a question from Colin regarding the hydrocell foam. Is the purpose for stormwater management in buildings?
The purpose of hydrocell foam is to absorb up to 50% of its volume in water, which it then freely releases under capillarity moment to the particulate media around it. So it provides a pore space and a pathway. So in terms of stormwater mitigation, if you have a rain event, and it all depends on the profile depth. So you have your field capacity of a profile that will enable you to absorb rain events. So typically, we look at, a 25 mil rain event will provide, close to field capacity of a thin profile garden. Now, 25 mil rain event, is that over an hour? Is that over a day? They all have a bearing as to whether you're going to reach field capacity quickly or slowly, and depends on the starting point as to whether you then start to produce water to drainage. But it'll definitely slow the impact of a rain event reaching the drain levels, regardless of whether it's at field capacity already or not.
Yeah, Jeff, Colin here. Sydney
Hello.
Water has sort of produced a seminar that I attended, and they were talking about one of the main beneficial factors to building owners was in rooftop gardens as a method of collecting and managing stormwater. Have you come across that in your work, that's been one of the driving forces for like a high-rise or a large commercial property?
Well, a high-rise traditionally doesn't have a huge amount of space left on it for a green roof. We're normally around a created breakout level. Extensive green roofs as opposed to intensive green roofs serve a different purpose. So the intensive green roof is a lived-in space, and generally you're growing larger species and people are mingling in that area. When it's an extensive roof, it's only ever walked through as part of the maintenance exercise, and they would be what you would consider your water collection drivers, because they're a large space, relatively cheap to produce, and if the driver is rainwater detention, stormwater detention, then you can effectively measure a 25 to 50 millimetre rain event as a mitigating solution. It's not a driver that we've had put in front of us. I know there are different scenarios that will come about from as that, but I mean, in most development approvals, they've got to put a percentage of green infrastructure back to match what was there prior or to meet a development approval criteria. They're different from state to state. I know that 2 projects we're working on in Sydney at the moment, their development approval requirement meant that they had to reinstate the surface area of the development block back at 1-for-1 onto the building to achieve their development approval. So you can't do that horizontally because there's all sorts of other things happening, plant, room, solar, etc., etc. So you can do that through a series of planter boxes at different levels, green facades at different levels, roof gardens as part of the integration with the rooftop level, integrating with BMU or rope access davit points, and working through with solar and plant room setup.
Thanks. Yeah.
Okay. Are the hydrocell flakes something like perlite? Somebody asked.
No. Perlite is an exfoliate product, and it's very good at bringing air into a space, not so great at water. So it's generally introduced for air purposes. We have done mixes with, in our hydroponic realm, we have a product called Fytocell that is pH neutralized that we often combine with perlite, or we grow Fytocell on its own. The hydrocell is so different in the sense that roots grow through it. They will grow through perlite, not as willingly, but they will grow through it. But hydrocell, you'll take out a flake of hydrocell and it's got roots passing through it. It's part of its integration. So it's not a blocker. I mean, there was a period a while ago where people were using polystyrene, God help us, to lighten green roof profiles or planter box profiles, you'd find it all over the yard when it was being mixed. You know, it adds absolutely nothing to the media mix because it takes away pore space. So it's of no value. So
what does
very different to perlite.
What does a hydrocell look like? Well, is it on your website?
Yeah, I should have a piece here. I don't. Sorry. It's a random size plate from dust to golf ball size.
Oh, okay.
And we don't worry about the size so much because all of it is available for plant root development.
Okay. Thank you. So Megan has asked, are the typical spec sheets available for download on your website? So we can explain. Yeah. Yes,
they are. They would just make an application by email to a website, and we then send them as a link.
Okay, sure. How do you check the existing waterproofing before starting a project?
Okay, so thankfully there are some wonderful systems now. I go back to the desalination plant. That was one of the first times that the ILD vector mesh system was brought in to Australia. It originates in America, went to New Zealand, and then when we were designing the desal green roof, we need, because the slopes are up to 20 degrees, you can't do a flood test, so that's out. So you needed to bring in a technique that would enable you to QA the waterproofers in their work, QA the landscapers, Fytogreen, making sure they didn't cut the membrane and cause any problems. So because we're working off a marine ply substrate, you had to lay down a 50 mil grid of very fine stainless steel mesh, and that was glued to the substrate, and the perimeter wire for the vector for the ILD system is connected, and then the membrane laid over the top. And the way that works is that they'll walk over with 2 probes looking for positive and negative current, and if there's a leak in the membrane, they'll get a response as they walk past that, because they're getting a response back to that vector mesh. Or if it's a concrete substrate roof, then it's just a perimeter wire. So it's a very cheap investment. It's typically, 200 or 300 square meter green roof on a concrete substrate might cost $1,500 to set up a perimeter wire system and have it tested. So it enables you at any stage in the future, unless there's a polystyrene void filler in that, to go back and find that leak to within a 50 mil location by walking over the roof with a probe. Because if you get a leak in a green roof, there's obviously a slope on the screed or on the substrate. It may start over there, but you find it somewhere else. So the only way you could find it traditionally was to dig up the green roof and work your way back. This way you can walk the green roof, find exactly where it is, and come down, dig down, patch it, move on.
Sounds amazing. So you lay
very
that on every green roof that you do, you put that on and then it stays there for the life.
Yeah, not every green roof, because everybody has different opinions in life, but any project that is over a live space or a special space, it's worth doing. And it's, on commercial buildings, there's all sorts of different types of waterproofing membranes. I'll start at the cheap end of life. That's sprayed on polyurethane, sprayed on liquid rubber, God help us. They certainly, the sprayed on polyurethane is prolific and commonly used, and on a concrete substrate would be fit for purpose. When you get to a lightweight substrate that has movement in it, so CFC sheets, Guyon, marine ply, it's generally built on a steel structure or timber structure, so there'll always be a little bit of movement. You want a sheet-based membrane, so that's twin sheet torchon at the cheaper end of the spectrum, through to a butanol-based membrane, through to Sikasana-Fel PVC membrane as you get more up the line in cost. They all have different warranty lengths, but as with everything in life, you pay what you get you get what you pay for.
Okay, thank you. Rado is asking if there are any relevant Australian standards you need to adhere to other than the fire safety we should keep in mind when specifying green roofs or vertical gardens.
There isn't an Australian standard for green roofs.
Oh.
We design plant species to BAL levels, BAL. So, there's different requirements for BAL 29 versus BAL 40 is getting quite difficult. But, it's about how you design the capping and the parapet and ensuring there's lack of membrane exposure to fire events. Your species design is about a low foliage buildup. So there's a number of plants that don't burn readily, don't senesce readily. So you're reducing the fuel load in your design. The D-cell was one of those we had to design to that criteria. So, a lot of the things that would be lovely down there, we couldn't put because it was just risk averse. And we've got a number of residential projects coming up that are going to be quite substantial green roofs where we're having to design to BAL 29, which is not that onerous, but still a consideration.
Okay, thank you. And somebody else asked if are birds generally encouraged or discouraged?
Well, it all depends on the garden. We just finished a large green roof in Burnie, Tasmania with UTAS. It's just over 2,000 square metres and it was opened earlier in the month. And we've already got plovers nesting up there quite happily. So it's only 6 months, 6 months old. The D-cell, we were continually finding ducks nesting, mutton birds trying to burrow in. They do give you a hell of a fright when they lift up under your feet, but they're deemed safe places, so birds will naturally go and nest there.
I guess it depends on the bird. What type of birds?
Well, free of predators other than, yes, eagles, etc. But they are. That's why we find a lot of the establishment that we see.
I guess you have to work out what's in the area.
Yeah, look, terrestrial predators, don't find their way to green roofs the same, foxes, etc.
Yeah, sure. Okay. I don't ask, do you generally take accountability for the for the waterproofing as well, or is the waterproofing done by others before you install the green roofs?
The latter is far more preferable. I sleep better at night. The builder is the guy building the building, and they're responsible for preparing the substrate. So we make them responsible for installing the membrane. We'll go through an ITP process, which is checking that the membrane has been tested and is ready for us to install. We'll do a visual inspection just as a safeguard, because the time between when that membrane's tested and when we come on, I have no idea what's happened up there. And someone could have walked through with a nail stuck in there or screw stuck in their foot and their boot. And before we know it, we've got all these lovely little holes all the way across. So there's a whole heap of care, and the builder is the best man to ensure his work site is safe.
Okay, very good. And last one, Eric asks, how do you work around balustrade requirements and planter boxes and pots, etc.?
So we're talking about balustrade for installation. So a lot of residential projects don't have temporary balustrade in place. So we've become certified installers of temporary balustrade so that our construction guys can do work on what we call small-scale residential green roofs safely, or they'll be working off a rope harness. If it's in relation to planter boxes and balustrade, I'm not quite sure. Does that mean the balustrade is in the way of the planter box because the planter box is on the outside? A balustrade is a legal height of 1050 mil. someone stands on a step ladder to reach over that to get their hips over it so they can reach across. That's where the problems start. So, you know, when you're designing that type of thing, you know, of course, in a commercial building, it's easier. It's all for rope access coming from outside, because, you know, apartment owners don't want people walking through their balconies. If it's a residential, then it's a matter of designing fit for purpose so that you can reach these things safely from the balcony, rather than trying to meet an architectural intent that then makes it very hard to maintain.
Okay, thank you. Now, I just looked at the time and it's 6:30.
Oh my gosh, sorry. I've got a long way to go.
When you're having fun. We've still got 41
you want me to
people.
go quickly? I'll go quickly through here, shall I?
Yeah, I guess so. We've still got 41 people, so everyone's still interested, but
Okay.
we might start getting hungry.
All right, I'll go quickly. Green facades, you know, that's planter boxes integrated with trellis wires or mesh. Key benefits here is it's a more economical way of getting greenery onto a building. You know, passive ventilation car park, like the Platinum project on the left. The CO2 reduction inside and the temperature change inside the space was quite phenomenal. So we've got some good research on that. If anyone really wants to delve deeper, I can send that to them. Things that are out of the norm, these blades that we did in Harold Park in Sydney, you know, it was the first of, they're fully suspended. Project we did in New Zealand many years ago, very low light, all cascading foliage and climbing up wires. So Epipremnum and then Philodendron hederaceae, Hoya, the 3 species that we used. In Melbourne, there was some testing of all the overpass, level crossing removal overpass. So to reduce graffiti, we did a series of piers and columns with green facades, and it's been very effective. It certainly stopped them being sprayed. A bit of a process here on how we do pre-grown green facades. You know, these are lifted in by crane, pre-grown in the nursery for 12 to 18 months, enables us to get them up to a point where we then transfer them to the host wire. So they're grown on an identical trellis on the temporary frame on the top left, transferred across to the host mesh so that it's seamless, and it enables us to get very quick establishment on these types of projects. I'll keep going past the self-assessment questions, so they're there. I mean,
can I just stop you there? Which plants are those ones growing up the wall?
They're Pandorea jasminoides, lady di.
Very nice.
So this is a wall that gets morning sun only.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Planter boxes, you know, we'll talk about fire compliant. Actually, if I go back a slide, the way of the world now with fire compliance, you need to have breaks with your green facades. So you need to physically break it. You can't have it near a window. So there's some new design parameters that have come in since we did that project. Fire compliant options, powder coated aluminium, GRC, they'll all pass 1530.1, which is fantastic. The standard systems that we did for many, many years, LDPE, unfortunately plastic, won't pass anymore. So, you know, we've moved our design and fabrication to more to aluminium than we do with the LDPE now. I think I should show this. It's a lovely project that we did many years ago. It's converting an 800 square metre warehouse for Caroma. We did daylight analysis and had those skylights put in, old original roof sheets removed, so that we could do all of this without any supplementary lighting at all. And when it opens up again, if you're in Sydney, please take the time to go and have a look. They hold a lot of CPD presentations there as part of their green infrastructure movement. It's a wonderful space to be in. I'll move on from there. Different things that we've created over time. Wentworth Marina Square in Marina Point, in Sydney. 20 levels of planter boxes going up to the 20th floor. A lot of the Parramatta redevelopment we're involved with was Walker Corp. Planter boxes at height, providing green screens for cafes and breakout areas. This one's on Parramatta 3 building, I think, or 4. School we did in Sydney, Shore. So a combination of cascading climbing foliage with fall protection mesh. Project we did level 27 in the middle for Lend-Lease on the 447 Collins Street project. One we just finished recently in Timothy Lane on the right. We've got 400 odd square meters of fire compliant green walls and a laneway that has no light. So we've got 20 LED lights providing us with a growing environment. And fortunately, I've only got that slide up there, but it's spectacular. So anyone in Melbourne, it's worth the walk. Bespoke creative things that we've developed. So we have terrariums that we did for Angel Place. So recycled irrigation into a water reservoir. So it's self-sufficient. Wicking planters on the top right. We've developed a wicking system that's bespoke, so we can make any shape and provide watering intervals between 4 and 8 weeks. Pot and pot systems on the bottom left and on the bottom right. They typically have a 21-day cycle. 3D bespoke gardening, so the phyto arbor system, the phyto columns, curved green walls, and a phyto blade. This is a project in Brisbane, so they're 2-meter stalactites, and because of access constraints, we stopped them there and we just allow the climbers to carry on beyond. Move on. Phyto arbor system. This is developed to provide extremely lightweight scenarios. So the weight of the top example at Pacific Square in Queensland is 25 kilos a linear meter. So it enables us to design with long lengths, minimal drainage outlets. It's a fully hydroponic system. We pre-grow the elements in the nursery and they're popped into position. The bottom left, we have a lot of roofs that are metal deck roofs, and so the loading is only 25 kilos a square meter. We've had clients that just don't like looking out of their upstairs story window at a metal deck roof, and so we're able to create the phyto arbor system. And we've got quite a few of these projects going, and they're really quite spectacular, and it's a wonderful solution. The bottom right is just our R&D in the nursery. I mean, out of a 200 mil wide module that's 130 mil steep, 99.9% available pore space for root development. We can cascade over 4 meters. It's an extremely versatile solution. Project we did using that same solution at 60 Mountain Place. This is on level 30, and we've also got one down on level 4. The whole aim, this was developed in conjunction with Hassels, was to get that curtain of green in the breakout area. One of our signature projects we did in Sydney. These are a combination with Tensile Design and Construct. We developed these phyto arbor systems that are circles, and I'll just let the vision speak for itself. They're quite spectacular. They are very low light, and so we've designed to the light levels. In time, we'll have material cascading 6 meters plus. One of our curved and circular walls, early projects we did on the top left in New Zealand, whole series of columns along Federal Street. Project we did in Preston Markets with a curved circular And then another project we completed for the W Hotel in Brisbane. We've got some very interesting projects coming up later on in the next year. Queen's Wharf will have 10 columns hanging 18 metres down into an atrium space. That's it'll be sort of the first for Australia. The Phyto blade system that we've been working on, it enables us to create double-sided foliage that can pivot and move 270 degrees. So it can be set up as a passive pivot or a mechanical pivot. And it's just a way of greening when you've got very limited space and no wall to attach to. I want that to move on. Why is that?
How does that work, Jeff? Where does
it's trade secret. Can't tell you. No, the passive pivoting or the mechanical pivoting?
Well, just how do the plants grow up that skinny thing? What are they attached to?
So these are, it's our fire compliant phytofelt system, double-sided, and we then create, can be panels 300 wide, 560 wide, 870 wide, whatever we want in terms of the blade width, double-sided, and the height is all about how many sections we want to create before we get a break for interest. And the way it pivots at the top in a passive pivot, it's just allowed to cycle on shackles that are twisted that allow it to move with wind. So it's we want something to drain to normally with that. We can fix them at the base, but we prefer them to hang free. We're a real specialist at maintenance. We get asked to maintain other people's projects. We get certainly asked to retain to keep our own projects going. Often a body corporate think they want to save some money, they'll go somewhere else. I'd say we have about 75% of those come back, wishing they hadn't changed, but that's life. Sometimes money overrules common sense, and these are an asset, so they need to be looked after. They represent a measurable cost per annum, and but the cost to replace is ridiculous. So we really encourage people to look at this sensibly. As I say, we have 14 full-time staff just on maintenance, and it represents, a massive part of our business. Different projects where money overruled common sense. On the left, how we had it. On the right, unfortunately, once money becomes an issue. Sad, but true, but there's enough robustness in the system to survive, but it's not looked after the way it should be.
I've noticed.
Oh, I hate it.
It's my local shopping centre.
I hate it. We're about to do a whole heap of new stuff for them up there, but I just hope that they have
so good at first.
They have a national philosophy of how their maintenance is managed. So, and the people that do that are very good at doing pots, but that's about it. Floating gardens, floating wetlands, I've been developing that for a number of years. And, for us, it's just an interesting adjunct to what we do. One of our first installations was at the D-cell plant. It's all about providing bird habitat. It's about reducing temperature buildup, reducing nutrient buildup. So we've got different designs that we do for different outcomes. We've got a project in Brisbane at the moment where the water quality is very Na and Cl high. And as a result, with the high sodium and chloride levels, what plants will work. So we've been able to develop species that will proliferate, and by harvesting the foliage, you remove that content out of the space. We'll have a lot more of these to come. It's a really interesting part of what we do, and the number of inquiries is phenomenal. We've only concentrated at what I call small residential, private through to council level, but we have them now from as far as Tasmania to Western Australia, as far north Queensland. And yeah, it's something that we're very excited about. You can see all this sort of stuff. If anyone's interested, I can send the brochure because I realise time is eating away. Other things that we have, our Fytoclone, Hydrocell RG30, Phytocell. There's the foam that you wanted to see. The Hydrocell RG30 we put in a lot of our intensive roof gardens as a filtration water reservoir layer. So it replaces the coarse sand layer that's often placed, sits above the geofabric, and it does a wonderful job at preserving water between irrigation cycles. Doesn't take away anything from a valuable root volume. In fact, it enhances it because really 99% of the volume is available for root development. Why use a proper green roof media? I can tell you there's some really sad stories out there. There's a lot of design done with A and B horizons. The B horizon is highly organic, so whilst they may limit it to 300 mil deep, it's still going to disappear in time. These are scenarios where just poor design, high organic content in the media. It can be all sorts of reasons. It's light, it's easy to blow. But this is what happens after a very short time. And you can't fix that. The only way to fix that is to dig the whole thing out and start again. So when you think about the cost of media, you know, we get it there, for $35 a square metre extra, you put the proper stuff in, but you do battle with builders that only think about the first dollar, not the next one. So it's something that we have really focused on, and that 750,000 square metres of green roofs that we have in this country, we can be proud of. We know we're not going to get that tap on the shoulder that the man on the left is going to get for that type of installation. So we're very much research-based in what we do. We test everything in our nursery for at least 2 years before we release it. And, you know, one, that's to make sure we haven't missed something. Two, enables us to get really good photos for when we release it. And three, you know, we want to make sure that we safeguard our reputation. You know, we have the leading botanist in the country. I think a group of leading designers in what we put together and solutions that we're asked to solve. We would certainly be the leaders in understanding light levels and how plants interact with light and how we mitigate wind risk at height. And, you know, I think we're sort of the passion that our maintenance team put into what we do enables us to never have to wish we didn't see that moment as we walk past one of our past projects. That's it. So I should go back to that in case anyone needs that for their self-assessment questionnaire. Is there any questions that may come out of that, or is everybody hungry like me?
I'm getting hungry. There are a couple of new ones. Somebody asked about the best growing media for planter boxes. I'm actually thinking, do you think we need to have a separate little webinar and talk about planter boxes and growing media for planter boxes and roof gardens? Because I just feel like I want to know so much more. And
if there's interest in that, happy to do that. We'll prepare something a bit more focused on planter boxes and media and why we do things in the way we design planter box profiles, the risks that we have to deal with. So that's fine.
Because it's a common thing that we come across, residential and commercial. What does everyone think that would be? I mean,
well, one of the classic is that people just don't put the right geofabric grade into these things. And if you put a climber into a planter box, for the amount of foliage that's going up, there's roots wanting to go somewhere, and you have to have the appropriate grade of geofabric to stop them finding their way to the drains.
Yeah, so, okay. Lots of people have said, yes, please. So we'll do that. We'll organise that. Okay. Because, yeah, too many questions. somebody asked if there's such a thing as a certified green wall contractor. Are there any specialised qualifications that they need?
No, I mean, there are courses that people can do. And so Bernie runs a course here in Melbourne.
On vertical gardens.
I'm not very strong on the certification process. I think because we sort of were at the very beginning, we've developed the systems and train our people appropriately.
Okay.
We do supply green walls to landscapers, and we provide them with the guidance on how to install. The designing of a green wall plant pallet is far more tricky than one would think. You can see a lot of different publications from around the world and within Australia where it's just a series of plants popped on the wall without any consideration. It's more about the shape and the colours that are interesting to the designer of the day without really understanding the implications of one plant with another. And so we have quite a different approach. You'll really see those sorts of species that we commonly see in what I call pot culture green walls in a Fytogreen green wall, because we're after so much more.
Okay. I forgot to ask with the green walls about the vertical gardens about the water. Do you recycle the water for using for the irrigation?
Yes. Yeah. So for all large commercial projects, certainly water sustainable design is factored in, because you need height to do that. You need somewhere for that drainage water to go to, and that's normally a collection tank below. It's much harder on a residential property because normally it's down at ground level. So unless you want to put a pump in, you can't get it back to your tank. So it's all about that design, location of the green wall. You would find all commercial green walls of size have that integrated drainage design and reuse as part of their whole process.
Yeah. Okay. Somebody asked about the how often do you need to maintain the garden? But I guess it depends on the garden.
A green wall outdoor low maintenance regime is 3 to 4 visits per annum. Indoor medium maintenance regime is 6 visits per annum. Premium is monthly.
Okay.
Comes down to the type of space, what you're dealing with. A lot of indoor green walls, you've got dust removal is a big part of what you've got to deal with, because it's surprising how much dust will build up on a plant leaf. So once you let dust build up, you reduce the ability for photosynthesis to occur and so on and so forth. So then you provide an easy way in for scale and aphids and things that you don't want. So it's the health of the plant and the cleanness of the leaf is key.
Yeah. Very good. Okay, I think we might leave it there. And
good. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much. That was very good and very inspiring. Oh my gosh, amazing. And really congratulate you on all your research and development and, forward thinking, and, obviously have a fantastic research team and, a lot.
Well, if anyone's ever down on the Mornington Peninsula, they're only got to let us know they'd like to visit, and we welcome people to come through the R&D and the greenhouse.
Oh, that'd be awesome. Yeah, that'd be really good. Well, there you go. There's an album visit coming up next year.
Well, we do have that. We have the architects and landscape architects will often bring a team down as part of their extracurricular, and we host students at either Melbourne Uni or Burnie. Will come down for field visits. We have a lot of interns that come out of the Burnie system that will come and spend 12 weeks with us. Obviously not while we've got COVID, everything's more difficult, but prior to that, it was a big part of what we had, and we enjoy it. It's good. It's really enables us to educate our audience, be it at the next level of landscape architect or designer or architect, or to show the landscape architects what's possible, and that's really the key.
Yeah. Well, also, yeah, let us know when you're doing some tours as well. Like, because sometimes, you know, it might be easier for us to jump on another tour, or I don't know, depending on your capacity. That could be
no,
an
look,
option.
I mean, we have groups up to, when we've got the uni students, we have groups up to sort of 22 at a time. So it's really, I'll leave it in your court. If you want to organise a visit, just let us know, and you know, that can be done.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, thanks for having me.
Wonderful. All right, thank you. So we'll work out a time together when we can do it. Probably the same day and time, so we get the same group.
That's fine.
Okay.
All
Thank
right.
you so much,
Thanks a lot.
everybody. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
Well
Bye.
done. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.